evening, everyone. Thank you. I'm Pat Jenny. I'm president of the Salisbury Forum. And on behalf of the Board of Directors, I want to welcome you here to Housatonic Valley Regional High School for this wonderful evening with Sam Waterston. This is the last program of our 2022-23 season. We do not have any forums scheduled during the summertime, but we have a full lineup of programs for the fall. All of our programs are free to the public, as you know, but because they are free, we count on your support and are very grateful for your contributions. You can make a donation in a number of ways by going to our website, salisburyforum.org, and hit the donate button. And on the donations page, you will see PayPal, Stripe for using credit cards, and our mailing address if you want to just send in a check. Or you can leave money at the front desk this evening if you'd like. Our administrative costs are quite minimal because we don't have a staff. So you can be assured that your support goes to help us bring all of these speakers to the forum, to the direct costs of bringing these speakers to you. So let me give you a preview of our fall programs. On Friday, September 22nd, we are partnering with the Berkshire-Taconic Community Foundation on a discussion led by Steve Rosenberg, formerly of Scenic Hudson, on how to ensure a sufficient supply of affordable housing, along with land conservation and other critical community objectives to ensure a vital future for this Northwest Corner region. As we all know, affordable housing is becoming scarcer and scarcer. Steve is going to facilitate a conversation among 3 housing and conservation experts, and we will start off with a reception before the program at the Salisbury School. Then on Wednesday, October 4th, we're putting together a very special program with the Lakeville Journal and the Sharon Playhouse. It will be at the Sharon Playhouse, and it will be a forum on truth in journalism. Mary Rassenberger, the CEO of the Authors Guild, will join us on Friday, October 27th for a forum on how to protect authors in this age of online publishing and artificial intelligence. Wrapping up the fall calendar on Friday, December 1st, will be a program with Dr. James Shepard from the Yale School of Medicine and the Yale Institute for Global Health. He is an expert on infectious diseases. Information on our website, of course, will be available on all of these programs. So this evening, we are very happy to have Sam Waterston return to the forum. He was last here in February 2011. Sam, of course, is best known as a much-honored actor of stage, film, and television for the last 50 years. He has won Primetime Emmy, Golden Globe, and Screen Actor Guild Awards. And he's been nominated for an Academy Award and a Tony. Take your pick. You might have gotten to know Sam as the prosecutor Jack McCoy for 16 years on Law & Order, or in the role of Saul on Grace and Frankie, which had a 7-year run on Netflix. Or you saw the film The Killing Fields back in 1984, when Sam played the role of New York Times reporter Sidney Schamberg in Cambodia. But what you might not know is that Sam also has been a leader in ocean conservation efforts as the chair of the Board of Oceana, a global NGO. And that's our topic for tonight. Sam is a born and bred New Englander, a neighbor here in the Northwest Corner, and a Yale graduate. In a recent article called Flunking Retirement, in this spring's Yale School of Public Health Journal, Sam is featured as one of Yale's 80-something alums who does not know how to slow down. Much of his attention now goes to Oceana, which was founded in 2001 and is now the largest nonprofit organization focusing solely on ocean conservation. The group has achieved a large number of policy victories to protect oceans from tracking commercial fishing fleets, reducing plastic trash in the oceans through getting state and national mandates to managing permits for fish farms. Oceana's goals include stopping overfishing, habitat destruction, oil and plastic pollution, and the killing of threatened species. So as all of us plan our summer ahead, which may include a visit to your favorite ocean beach, we thank Sam and Oceana for their efforts. So please join me in welcoming this program and featuring Sam Waterston. Thank you.
Our blue planet is at a crossroads. Soon there will be 9 billion of us to support. Where will all the food and resources that we need come from? There is a last refuge. One place to turn for wild, unfettered beauty, abundance, and diversity. It's under the waves, down deep into the sea, into the depths of our oceans. Oceans are the source of all life on our planet. Here we find the potential for unimaginable, renewable abundance. Over 1 billion people, including some of the poorest in the world, depend on our oceans and wild seafood for survival. This incredible bounty is in danger. Every day, we're taking out so much more than our oceans can reproduce. The spectacular wildlife of the deep is being hunted with military precision, wreaking havoc upon the balance of the oceans, which has taken hundreds of millions of years to perfect. Millions of sharks are finned. Millions of tons of seafood are caught and then thrown away. Ocean nurseries, the breeding grounds for new life, are being destroyed every day, indiscriminately. We are sabotaging ourselves and our children's future, throwing away one of our greatest sources of strength and renewal, draining our world's oceans of life, just when we need them the most, to feed our hungry planet. Our oceans are amazingly resilient. Sea life can reproduce quickly. It's not too late. We can turn the tide of destruction around. The sea is not ungoverned. Just 10 countries control most of the world's wild catch. Oceana has won key policy victories in many of these countries, protecting over 1 million square miles of ocean. And we can do this around the world. We know what works. We need to focus on 3 goals: stop overfishing, control bycatch, and protect the nurseries. With your help, we can restore the ocean's vitality. We can have oceans that provide 700 million meals a day. Let's honor the original source of life for our planet and ensure that it remains bountiful and beautiful for generations to come. Help us. Let's save the oceans and feed the world.
So, after that lovely introduction and that wonderful movie, we could just go straight to questions. Because everything that I'm going to say will be, to some extent, just detail and review. But thank you very much for coming. I was resting behind the curtain about a half an hour ago, and there were only 2 people in the auditorium. And I heard one of them say to the other, "Where are all the people? What if nobody comes?" And I had the same thought, so I'm very grateful to you. There's already plenty of talk about the man-made disasters built into these times, plenty of policy discussion, enough alarm bells for everyone. The good news is that the general public, you and me and the next guy, are dramatically more aware than even a few years ago of the amount of stress we modern humans have put on the planet, especially in the last 100 years, aware that now is the time to do something, that time is running out to avoid the worst consequences. The good news is also the bad news, because things have been let go so fast, facing them as they are is hard on our eyes and makes an easy road to despair, because it's so hard to see what any of us can do to change the course, slow things down, and save the situation. I'm delighted to be here tonight to say, don't be discouraged. I propose instead that you turn a big part of your climate effort, focus, concentration, time, and money to the oceans for 2 big reasons. 1, the oceans deserve the attention. They are 70% or so of the Earth's surface. They produce 50% of the Earth's oxygen. When well managed, they can produce enough wild-caught fish to feed 1 billion people a healthy protein meal every day of the week for the rest of time. Act as a gigantic shock absorber of carbon and heat in the atmosphere, and so on and so on and so on. And 2, just as vital, the oceans are a ready answer to discouragement. They respond promptly and powerfully when we do good things, even when we just stop doing stupid things. Promptly and powerfully enough to give us solid, visible, concrete, real-world grounds for believing that you and I can change the course of climate history. Promptly and powerfully enough to give us courage and hope every day, even in the face of deeply entrenched patterns of behavior, even in the face of mighty interests, even in the face of weak or corrupt governance, even in the face of our own less than perfect natures. It's good, satisfying, and rewarding work. I hope some of you who are here because this is your high school will go home thinking this might just be the job for you. Wherever you are in your life, with your attention now on the oceans, I propose that you put some weight behind Oceana, which has the work of saving the oceans and feeding the world well underway already. Oceana is a moving train. Please come aboard. If it doesn't feel like it's your thing, what with living 100 miles from the sea, or if it all feels like something you're not suited to do for any of the hundreds of reasons we all have for thinking those who do things that change the world are from some other kind of special category of human beings that we're not, or that the ocean is part of the world outside our area. To contradict that, I have examples for you of people coming to Oceana from places and pasts that you'd never expect, starting as close to home as you can get with myself. Thank you all for being here. It doesn't take a whole lot of people to make the point of the spear that changes the world. I want you to leave here feeling your power to change the course of things, with examples to take home with you, to hold in your head long after tonight, of people like yourselves who get changes of course large enough to actually change something as big as the whole planet, and counter forces as large as global human systems and human inertia. I want you to leave here knowing for yourselves and in detail what I have learned over my years of association with Oceana, that the oceans, because they are vast, because they are neglected, because they are responsive, are a golden opportunity to make a difference that turns the great ship of environmental abuse around and helps the planet help us. I want you to leave here knowing Oceana has the know-how for the job. The blessing of the oceans that they're not easy for humans to explore, that we can't breathe water, that a whole gigantic system of organisms, of which, wonderful as they are, the fishes and mammals of the sea, are just a minute fraction, a tiny portion of what's in there, with so much of the rest completely unknown to us. All of that has provided a certain layer of protection for the oceans. But that blessing is also the ocean's curse, because we can easily imagine they have nothing to do with us. So we easily use them, or ignore others who use them as a mine, a highway, and a dump. Easily ignore the damage industrial scale exploitation of them is doing down there and out there where we don't see it. Easily deceive ourselves and each other about how important, how essential the life of the unseen or unknown ocean is to our own survival and terrestrial well-being. Easily content ourselves with its sparkling surface and neglect the rest. This is a thoroughly wrong idea. Remember, half the air we live on comes from the oceans, and nearly every current stressor of the ocean ecology is man-made. Nothing to do with us? No, everything to do with us. But we, even those of us who read the papers and worry about things, have all been living pretty heedlessly, believing that environmental damage is the inevitable, necessary price of progress, and any way that we couldn't do any real harm to a system as enormous as the oceans. They used to teach that in fisheries departments at great universities in the United States up until about 25 years ago. But blessedly, it's an idea whose time has expired. Over the years, my city, New York City, whose Hudson River estuary, when Europeans first arrived, had held more oysters than all the rest of the world put together. Fished out nearly all those oysters to pave the roads, fertilize the fields, and feed ourselves a very cheap lunch. And fished out what had once been such a vast store of new kinds of fish that the Europeans settling there eventually gave up inventing names for them and settled on giving them numbers. 7th fish, 8th fish, 9th fish, 97th fish, 145th fish, and so on. Long before the fishing out was done, The city was using the Hudson River estuary and the surrounding waters as a dump for sewage and garbage and trash, up to and including as a place to throw away subway cars, as well as the entry ramp to the highway connecting New York to the world and the world to the whole state of New York, and beyond that to the whole country until the point was reached in the last half of the last century where it wasn't safe to eat any of the fish or shellfish still living in New York Harbor. But here again, the ocean is fertile. The ocean is resilient. Fish and other creatures of the sea converted those subway cars dumped in shallow waters off the Jersey coast into artificial reefs, and pretty soon made them into breeding grounds and housing for more sea life. And there are still over 200 species of fish that call the Hudson home. I just have to add another thing. I heard the gentleman who was waiting patiently for the rest of you to arrive. He said, there is a 25-mile square area, a dead zone off the Jersey coast from all the garbage that we have been dumping out there over the years. So the ocean is resilient, but you can kill it. With some effort and restraint, though, as much as anything by ceasing to do bad things, humpback whales are sometimes seen from apartment windows in Manhattan. And diamondback terrapin, you might have seen some terrapin in the movie. And seals and even oysters are coming back. The ocean is full of life, and it takes real persistence to beat it down to the point of collapse. We modern members of the human race have shown that it can be done, and we're the ones who can do it. But Oceana and other advocates for the sane use of this most generous resource have demonstrated that ocean abundance can still be restored. I hope you take that home with you. Stop beating down on the oceans, and in short order, the oceans will pay you back with plenty. The oceans, properly managed, will produce vastly more food for human beings to eat than now, when they are being held down from their potential by bad fishing practices, by misguided subsidies, pollution, warming seas, overfishing, and acidification. Oceana's motto has long been, save the oceans, feed the world. Is that still within reach? Hasn't the point of no return already been reached? Aren't we too far down the road, too long, expelled from the oceanic Garden of Eden that just, for example, produced codfish off our New England coast in such numbers that a sailor in some places could walk on their backs from his boat to the shore without getting his feet wet? Isn't all that lost for good? Well, it's so that there is such a thing as a point of no return, extinction, habitat destruction. Right now, here in New England, the right whale, who was so named because it lived near shore, was plentiful, slow-moving, rich in oil, not one to flee from humans, so easy to catch, and so the right whale for the whaling industry in the 19th century pursuit. It is now on the very edge of extinction, from which there is no coming back. And right now in the Northeast, in Canada and New England, ever since the collapse of the 1970s, the cod have yet to stage a convincing recovery because, first of all, the seed corn, the deep and plentiful base population of mature reproducing females, which can lay 3 to 7 million eggs in a single spawning season, and that had fueled every previous rebound, this time was bottom trawled and otherwise fished out by great international industrial fishing fleets. Full collapse is a hard place to come back from. Second of all, because other critters now occupy the space the cod used to call home. And finally, very importantly, The measures to allow them to build back have so far not been implemented forcefully enough to allow for a proper comeback. I'm from around here, as has been said, born and raised in Massachusetts, went to college in Connecticut, moved to the northwest corner in 1978. I read the papers. I was on a beach in Rhode Island when I read about the collapse of the cod fisheries. Let your New England mind dwell on that collapse for a minute. As a New Englander, you already know that codfish were the magnet that brought Europeans to America in the first place. Cape Cod, of course, got its name from the fish. The Grand Banks and George's Bank, ideal habitat for cod, haddock, flounder, all those New England staples now being replaced in our stores by farm-raised salmon, are a deep part of our regional myth. The Gloucester fisherman Winslow Homer painted, fished for cod. Henry David Thoreau wrote about them, and then suddenly they were gone. The collapse of the cod fishery was the beginning of my own awakening to the damage that was showing from all the abuse in the years since I was born in 1940. I had the concern, but until Oceana, I had no place to put it. I worried, but I felt powerless to act. That way lies despair. A bit of history. Before World War II in the late 19th century and early 20th, human fishing effort had grown enough to begin to depress fish stocks, a preview of what was to come. And then the war brought a period of respite for the fish, nowhere more than in the North Atlantic, so that by the end of it, when I was 5 years old and just beginning to notice such things, there was plenty of everything the sea could produce available at a very good price. When the price of chick lobsters, 1 pound lobsters, the smallest size you could legally sell, when that went over $1, my mother thought that was price gouging. And for quite a while, she refused to buy them. Now it's $24 for a lobster roll. In this same post-war period, the fishing industry around New England, but also around the world, expanded dramatically. Between 1950 and 1996, the global catch either nearly tripled or more than quadrupled, depending on how you read the records. What we have now is a crazy situation. More boats, more fishing effort, backed by more subsidies, chasing fewer and fewer fish. A major part of that expansion was in industrial fishing. Huge national fleets, fishing all over the world. If you've ever seen pictures of the Chinese fleet heading out to sea, anybody ever seen those pictures? Swarming the ocean? It's a sight you will never forget. Armed with radar, sonar, fish finders, precise maps of the ocean floor, nets up to 7 miles. You heard me, 7 miles wide. Bottom trawling equipment as much as 780 feet wide and 500 feet tall. Fishing vessels that can offload their catches onto refrigerator ships and never go into port, refuel and resupply, have made it so that fish have literally no place to hide. The first big crowds of foreign industrial fishers struck the Grand Banks, that ideal habitat for the fish we Westerners like to eat, and caught a tremendous amount of fish to start with, to the increasing alarm of Canadian and American interests. Their assault led directly to the collapse of the cod fisheries. Another big change was underway at the same time. Hoping to limit the access of distant water fishing fleets and to control the depletion of fish stocks in the seas adjacent to their own shores, coastal nations began to claim more and more of their coastal waters for themselves. Shortly after World War II, first Chile and then Peru, Peru, thanks to the Humboldt current, is home to the most productive fisheries in the world. They claimed sovereignty over the sea 200 miles out from their shores instead of the customary 3 as their own exclusive economic zones, their EEZ. Other countries followed. The UN began to discuss this only in 1967, and the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea only came into force on the 16th of November 1994, the day after I turned 54. By that time, habitats and patterns had formed, and a lot of the damage had already been done. As I just said, the initial motivation for the 200-mile limit was the protection of national resources so they could be exploited by the coastal states themselves. It was for the purpose of being able to do the exploiting themselves that they claimed that territory. Offshore oil and industrial fishing were the 2 top prizes. But help was on the way. The founders of Oceana, the benefactors and philanthropists who started, the scientists who staffed it, and its far-sighted leadership, looking at that same picture, saw something else. The chance, going coastal state by coastal state, starting with the ones with the biggest catches, to protect the underlying resources of the ocean from destruction and restore abundance, so that added all together, these separate EEZs, could feed 1 billion hungry people a healthy seafood meal for the rest of time. I've said that a couple of times already, and it bears repeating. While creating a cushion of resilience and plenty as protection against the changes that climate chaos brings, and a constituency of humans with a very good reason, food for survival, to be attentive to the protection and preservation of the great blue wonder at its doorstep. The vast majority of all the fish in the sea live in some nations' EEZ. So that's where Oceana went to work. And Oceana gave me realistic reason for hope. I'm not a scientist. I serve on the board of Oceana. A scientist looking for exactitude might be frustrated by these generalizations of mine. What I can say with authority, though, is that the picture I'm painting is thoroughly based on solid science. The staff of Oceana is peopled with first-class marine scientists. Doctors Daniel Pauly and Rashid Sumaila, 2 of the world's preeminent fisheries scientists, are on Oceana's board. They just shared the Tyler Prize for Environmental Achievement, which is often called the Nobel Prize for Environmental Science. The Tyler Prize made a short video about their award, narrated by my friend Ted Danson. You know him as the wonderful actor he is from television and the movies. Maybe you didn't know he went to school in Kent, Connecticut. That he, too, is on Oceana's board. That he was one of the founders of Oceana. Or that tar from offshore oil wells on his children's feet led him to do it. An achievement greater than anything he'd done before, something that really belongs on the base of a statue of him. I'd like to show that video to you now. As you watch, keep in mind that Ted Danson was an actor on Cheers, living the good LA show business life when the oceans took his attention. That Daniel Pauly, Dr. Daniel Pauly, whose astounding life story is told in a book on the table in the lobby, began life as the dirt-poor, virtually orphaned offspring of a brief affair between a black American GI stationed in Germany after World War II and a young French woman who'd gone there to work. starting in real poverty and with active racial discrimination to deal with all along the way. He is now a globally recognized authority on fish populations. Ask me how he made his reputation if you still got strength for questions by the time I'm done. His former students work all over the world. One of them runs Oceana Chile, about which more in a moment. Rashid Sumaila's interest in the environment began while growing up in Nigeria, when his grandfather used to say that people should walk as if the ground feels pain, where he received his Bachelor of Science degree with honors from Ahmadu Bello University and then received his PhD from Bergen University in Norway. He and Dr. Pauly are now both professors at the University of British Columbia in Canada. I hope you're starting to see a pattern here of people like yourselves who are now working to save the responsive and fertile oceans from disaster and step by step winning against the odds. None of this was written in the stars. Take courage yourselves. Together with lots of others with backgrounds as improbable and diverse, these men and women are now the point of the spear in saving the world from itself. Please feel free to imagine yourselves at their side. There's absolutely nothing to stop you. Please play the video.
In 1973, Alice and John Tyler founded the Tyler Prize for Environmental Achievement to recognize the greatest accomplishments in the fields of environmental science, energy, policy, and economics. For 5 decades, Tyler Prize laureates have focused worldwide attention on environmental issues that matter. This year, the Tyler Prize recognizes 2 individuals fighting to protect our oceans from overfishing: Professor Daniel Pauly and Professor Rashid Sumaila. Pauly, a marine biologist, and Sumaila, a fisheries economist, have spent decades researching the impact of overfishing and climate change on the world's oceans. Their analysis has given us a more accurate picture of the health of our oceans. Their work is a testament to the power of international, interdisciplinary collaboration and to the critical role that science can play in shaping a livable, equitable future for all. Before industrial fishing, there was an abundance of fish in our oceans.
The oceans provided for us. They were an extremely bountiful place. There was huge quantities of fish, big fish just for the taking.
Fishing was abundant. Resources were abundant.
At the end of the 20th century, we really still were treating the oceans as a frontier, as a place we could exploit.
When we started to fish industrially, that was when fisheries really reached the turning point. Those technological innovations like radar and sonar, and really the amount of hiding places for fish diminished greatly at that point.
RFMOs, the patchwork system designed to manage the high seas, the areas beyond national jurisdiction, that they were failing to do their job.
You know, when the FAO collected data, they trusted the countries who were presenting the information to them. But oftentimes, those data did not include when harvesting went over the designated quota.
The oceans were sending a clear signal that there was trouble.
Professors Daniel Pauly and Rashid Sumaila shared a vision for challenging the catastrophic decline of our oceans.
When I came to Canada, the giant stock of cod had just collapsed because of overfishing. And so I decided that I would become active in a conservation community.
So Daniel walks into my office and we started talking. That was the beginning.
Daniel and Rashid suspected that the data wasn't telling the whole story.
So what Daniel set out to do is to really reconstruct all of the fish that we catch. And when you do that, you find that the world's fish landings have been greatly underreported.
He has advocated to the FAO to improve their fishery statistics, and when they refused, he did it himself with the Sea Around Us project.
The launch of the Sea Around Us project, led by Daniel Pauly and supported by Rashid Sumaila, changed everything.
The databases that Daniel has built which have given so many more people the tools to be able to do excellent science, and particularly in the world's south, and that's democratized the whole field of fisheries science.
Daniel let the world know that no, the ocean is not a bottomless pit of fish. Professor Rashid Soumaila's groundbreaking work on fishing subsidies proved the economic case against overfishing.
What Rashid did was to think about fisheries globally and to think about the way that capacity-enhancing subsidies create these incentives to keep fishing boats operating when they shouldn't be economically.
Rashid's work tells us that we can make decisions in marine conservation that are good for humanity and the planet. He's covered bioeconomics, marine ecosystem valuation, game theory, discounting. I think fundamentally, Rashid has showed us again and again that overfishing doesn't make sense from an economic point of view.
In the global south, most of the people are people of color that are fishing nations. And most of them are women and children that get most impacted by the lack of fish.
Overfishing is one of the most critical ecological problems of the 21st century.
Unless we make solving overfishing a priority, we will lose far more than just fish and the industries that depend on them.
Daniel and Rashid's work has been monumental for ocean conservation, and especially in regions like the global south, where the problem of food insecurity are really a critical problem.
Rashid and I work together well because we have a similarity of purpose. We don't like stupid things happening, and basically overfishing is stupid.
It's just a nice marriage, if you like, of ecology and economics in a beautiful way that helps us to do things we couldn't do alone.
Daniel's and Rashid's work has transformed the way that we think about the ocean.
We are in the midst of the United Nations Decade of Ocean Sciences for Sustainability, and the Tyler Prize Executive Committee recognized Daniel Hawley and Rashid Soumaila as two champions of sustainability of the world's oceans.
A lot of the world's governments and fishing industries are still listening to the siren voices of the FAO telling them that everything's fine. You can look at them and simply say, you're running out of fish.
The question was not whether hope or not. The question is what we're going to do about it.
And some of us say, oh, look, it's just me. What I do doesn't matter. What you do matters. Little things add up, so let's all do our part.
So, that's the question. What will you do? I suggest you make your weight felt by going to Oceana's website to act in concert with like-minded people, to donate, become a wave maker, become a major donor, volunteer, join, to publicize success and the promise of more and more success, to talk up the oceans, to give hope to others by showing that the game is not lost and that apparently unwinnable fights are being won in Chile, in Belize, in the United States, the EU, Peru, the Philippines, the United Kingdom, Brazil, Canada, Mexico, all over the globe. I've just come back from an Oceana board meeting in Patagonia, in Chile. If you went there, you'd be hit in the face as we were by looking directly at the world to be saved. The world and something feeling close to its original, raw, and beautiful form. The Magellan winds in your face are part of what make the primitive world easier to see. They circle the globe between the rest of South America to the north and Antarctica to the south. They seem to blow all the time with gusts of 70 or 80 miles an hour and with nothing, much to stand in their way or to slow them down. They rush by the jagged peaks, the great spikes of granite that rise straight up out of the flat plain, over myriad glaciers that bend and flow into other glaciers and lean down the sides of the peaks, so many you lose count. All the elements, air, earth, fire, and water, plus ice, vast and in your face. In Patagonia, standing on a causeway in the middle of a glacial lake with one picturesque little iceberg floating in it. and wedged between two sheer black cliffs, we looked across it at the ice blue face of a glacier at the narrow end of the lake, rising up into mist with the sun lighting it from behind and the wind coming out of it. You couldn't help feeling that you were looking at the dawn of the world. And then on the road back, in the van, we came to a T-junction where a sign points one way toward the hotel in the town and the other way toward a place called Fin del Mundo, the end of the world. It was a primal reminder of the nature of the world around us that we sometimes don't see because we're used to taking it for granted. But we were in Chile for a board meeting in Oceana because Chile has made itself into a great example of what can be done in this imperfect world by inspired and talented people joining together against all odds to make change for the oceans and all the inhabitants of this one blue planet. To quote from our CEO, Andy Sharpless's letter to the board to kick off that meeting in Chile, face a map of the world and pick just one country in which to win transformations in ocean conservation that will inspire the world. Set your standards very high. Your chosen country should be a member of the world's 10 most important fishing nations, measured by the size of its catch. Its coastline should rank among the world's 5 longest. Its biodiversity should include the blue whale, the largest animal ever to live on Earth, larger than even the greatest of the dinosaurs. Its fishing communities and its fishing industry should represent a broad cross-section of the world's commercial marine fleets, methods, and gears, from large industrial vessels dragging huge trawls the size of several jumbo jets, all the way down to small wooden indigenous craft deploying a single hook on a line or a lone wader retrieving shellfish. Success in your chosen country should prove Oceana's effectiveness is globally scalable. It should be convincing even to a person profoundly convinced that ocean conservation is a sentimental lost cause appealing only to people with big soft hearts and small soft minds. So please, pick a place where ocean conservation requires us to defeat profitable, expanding, modern industries possessing powerful, wealthy friends in government. Make us fight not just industrial, commercial fishing companies, but also polluters, such as massive international companies operating huge mines and salmon farms. Chile is such a country. In the year 2000, less than 1% of Chile's ocean was protected. Its major fisheries, hake, sardines, and anchoveta, were overfished and collapsing. Salmon farming was expanding so fast that Chile would soon produce and export more of these non-native fish than anywhere except Norway. Indigenous fishers operating out of the most remote inhabited place in the world, Rapa Nui, Easter Island, faced a growing and largely unmonitored threat of illegal fishing by foreign vessels, industrial vessels, often Chinese. The lucrative terrestrial mining industry, one of Chile's top 3 sources of foreign currency earnings, was doing well and soon was going to flex its power by proposing dumping its tailings at sea. Today, Chile has protected 47% of its exclusive economic zone, 24% of it as no-take areas, making it the champion of the world so far. Its national fishing law requires scientific quotas and rebuilding of depleted fisheries. The jack mackerel is fully recovered. It is above maximum sustainable yield. That's a tricky phrase. Ask me about that phrase. Supporting annual quotas of 1 million tons, up from less than a third of that size, in just 13 years. Bycatch is controlled. VMS satellite information on vessel locations is uploaded to Global Fishing Watch. Global Fishing Watch is the 8-year-old brainchild of Oceana, SkyTruth, and Google, and it's an enormous success and freely visible to the world. Its remote islands are patrolled by its Navy, which monitors for intrusions by foreign vessels. The salmon farming industry must now fully disclose its use of antibiotics, which it was using very freely in very crowded pens, limit fish density in its sea pens, and pay substantial fines if it releases salmon into the wild. Pay for each fish. Dominguez's giant open pit copper mine project, a threat to the rookery of 80% of the world's Humboldt penguins, whose already depleted numbers make it vulnerable to extinction, was just defeated by unanimous vote of the nation's ministerial council. Yeah, bravo. The dumping of mining tailings at sea has stopped all seamounts. Ask about seamounts and thermal vents and why they're in the news these days. They are fully protected against bottom trawling, and plastic pollution is being reduced by one of the world's toughest laws, reducing single-use plastic packaging and promoting refillables. The secret to getting plastics under control is to turn off the tap at the source. Produce less plastic, and there will be less plastic to clean up. What we've been invited to do as good citizens is do the cleanup. But we don't stand a chance against the enormous pipeline of plastic that's being produced to be thrown away after one use and then find its way into the ocean, where fish and birds and mammals will mistake it for food and die. Oceana chose Chile 20 years ago. Chile's subsequent success restoring and protecting its marine abundance and biodiversity is a proof case for the world. That's how Oceana works, step by step, country by country, with a well-developed strategy that includes the law, the media, the people, the government, persuasion, science, and pressure, with a specific named goal and a ticking clock on getting results. Meanwhile, at the other end of the hemisphere, in Canada, Oceana was instrumental in getting the new Fisheries Act passed, which, when what it has committed the country to doing is accomplished, will give the fisheries of Canada, including the cod, a second chance such as they haven't ever seen before. Before this new Fisheries Act, you know what the old Fisheries Act said? The Minister of Fisheries shall do as he sees fit. Because of Oceana's work, its allies' work, and the work of ocean-facing countries where Oceana is active every day of the week, the promise is tantalizingly within reach that the whole of the Western Hemisphere have a new birth of its oceans and become once again the plentiful, self-renewing source of protein for the planet for the rest of time it was when the first Europeans arrived, as it was when the Hudson River estuary had more oysters in it than all the rest of the world. Oceana isn't doing this by itself, has never claimed that, never would claim it, any more than any one individual by themselves changes anything. There was something already afoot in the minds of people as extraordinary and ordinary as you and me. Oceana helped it recognize itself, helped it organize itself, helped it flourish, helped it become effective, gave structure to the hope, sometimes led, sometimes was the man behind the curtain, sometimes provided crucial means, whatever it took, to empower the forces already at work. The delusion that any one person could do this pervades our movies and our politics, but that's fiction, just a story. What really happens, and please take this home with you, is that individuals first look for themselves at what's right and then team up, and then the world changes. That's where you come in. That's where I come in. In an ideal world, we might none of us necessarily be the first picks for the job. But thank God, this is not an ideal world. It's a real one. And we're made for this. It's already been shown, and Oceana has shown it, that people just like us get great things done. So join me. Stop worrying. Act. You can get the details on Oceana's website. Just Google oceana.org. Join the team. The train is moving. It's gathering steam. If you have any strength left for questions, ask me what happened in Peru. You can tell that I'm super psyched about this. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the team. Save the oceans, feed the world. Sorry for all the gravel in my voice. I've been
Sounded good to me.
on a national tour of, on a tour of New England by car in traffic.
First of all, I thought I was smart and I realized how little I know, so I want to thank you. Second of all, one of the things I try to do is reduce plastic. I drink from this, not from what's on there. And whenever I go to a reception, which you'll notice they always have these little plastic cups to put the wine in, I always try and be polite, I always succeed, and say, next time can we have something that's compostable? So that's my little touch. But thank you, I learned so much.
Well, let me just say that all of those things help and are good. And one of the ways in which they are good is that they confirm you in your own convictions and you think about what you care about as you do them. And the problem is systemic, and its root cause is the oil industry, which, as the demand for oil has diminished, is diminishing, or at least by some measures it is. The oil companies have reassured their investors that everything will be all right because there'll always be plastic. So you gotta go at the source too.
With the warming of our planet and melting in our northernmost oceans, how does that affect what's happening with the pollution? I understand people are buying up the ocean rights in those areas to do drilling and other things.
Where are you? Where do you? The Arctic, you mean?
Yeah.
Like I said before, I'm not a scientist, and I'm certainly no expert on what's going on in the Arctic, except that anybody who reads the newspapers know that Norway, Russia, the United States, Canada, everybody who has a border, that borders the Arctic Sea, knows what's under the seafloor and knows how valuable it is and covers it for itself. So, again, everything we can do to discourage the exploitation of oil from under the sea is a good thing. And then obviously we all need to do our parts in how we consume energy. And the more it's coming from renewable sources, the better that is. So, as in every case, there's the thing that a person can do privately, and my goodness, so we all should. And then there's what we can do collectively to get a systemic change. And that's why I feel so fortunate to be associated with Oceana, and that's why I encourage everybody here to do the same thing, and if not with Oceana, then team up with somebody, because make your convictions effective by teaming up.
Are you getting any interest from India and China, our two most populous nations? Are they completely resistant to this? I'm curious. Thank you.
Oceana is, obviously, China is an enormous fishing nation. And Oceana looks at the possibility of working there. China's not really interested in an outspoken organization that's telling them that what they're doing now ain't right. So having an office there, I can't tell you what the situation is today. Maybe everybody has been forced to work from abroad. So in terms of influencing Chinese decisions, all the pressure comes from outside. Obviously, it affects China when Chile protects Easter Island, because before it was protected, it was open season, and the Chinese fishing fleets were having a field day there. Now, it's regulated. Obviously, Global Fishing Watch is a similar thing, because fishing pirates, from not just from China, but from there's a illegal, unregulated, and unrecorded fishing is a gigantic problem in the high seas.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oceana might look at the work of Landesa in China. It's very hard for international NGOs to work in China, but Landesa is a group that works on land rights and has a very sophisticated and nuanced and effective outreach in China. Quite unique, actually. But I wanted to thank you. The introductory film I thought was really quite beautiful and moving. But I was struck by how
do you spell Landesa?
Landesa. It's really, it's really quite a unique thing, I admit, what they do. But in the film, we saw people whose livelihoods depended on fishing, and there was this, really nasty, wasteful fishing that we saw there, and the horrible markets. And I wanted to see the people in the boardrooms responsible for that. Those people, that's their livelihood. And they're not responsible, but they are so much part of the problem. And it alarms me a little when I see images of the workers who are doing it simply to survive. So anyway, any comment on that? My question was, how do you work with those boardrooms? How does the government and the corporations behind those fishing practices, how does Oceana deal with both government and corporate?
before I answer, does anybody need to leave? What your question opens up is the story of Oceana's experience in Peru. And what I've been trying to convey in this talk is that Oceana reacts situationally and perseverantly. So Peru is this enormously productive fishery. Lots of crazy stuff happens in that fishery. And it's cyclical, having to do with weather patterns and other things. It's naturally cyclical, but the fishers would like to take the same amount of fish this year as they took last year. So it's enormously complicated. Oceana started out having identified the Nazca Ridge, which is a mountain range that sort of sticks out like a unicorn's horn from the coast of Peru into the deep ocean. And Oceana had the ambition to have this largely unexploited part of Peru's EEZ declared a marine protected area, not anticipating that there would be people in Peru who would think that they might want to use it someday. So things would go along. This happened several years in a row. The legislation or the decree that was needed to protect the Nazca Ridge would get right up to the finish line, and then, something would happen, and the whole project would have to be restarted. So finally, Oceana learned its own lesson and changed its mission in Peru to forming a coalition with the artisanal fishers of Peru to protect the near shore of Peru for their use only, and then have an area a little further out for smallish but industrial fishing boats, and then out beyond that limit, beyond 5 miles, have an area for industrial-sized fishing boats. And I wish I had the film to show you, because it is so exciting, because everybody said that this was an idea that was dead in the water. And there is film of artisanal fishers themselves going to the Capitol and buttonholing representatives, and there are pictures of the representatives looking like, no, this is just hopeless, you can't do this. And then there are other pictures of them reading from a script provided by the artisanal fishers, and saying, this is what the law ought to be. And so they went from 0 to 60, and they did it in a little more than a year. And now there's the beauty of this solution is that the artisanal fishers will be a constituency for its enforcement, because if boats that don't belong there come within the 3-mile limit, there will be artisanal fishers out there trying to make a living, and they will say, hey, what are you doing here? And they'll call the police. So that's a little hope for the artisanal fishers.
Has Oceana had any effect on curbing the whaling industry?
Well, the fight that Oceana is involved in now is we've got a sort of double-edged problem. The right whale, right off our shores, is in real danger of extinction. And it also is living in places where wind farms would like to locate. And a way needs to be found to do both those things, because we need them both. So that's where Oceana's energy, as far as whales is concerned, is going right now. And so far so good, but I mean, this is not the work of a day. Belize is another country where Oceana operates. They got the Belizean government to ban offshore oil exploration. Belize had, within the EEZ of Belize is a big chunk of the second biggest coral reef in the world. And gill net fishing and development and oil exploration, and then, God forbid, oil drilling, threatens to destroy one of the great wonders of the world, natural world. So, he persuaded the government to end all that, and then the government changed. And the new head of Belize wants to open all that stuff up. So, you have to be in this for the long haul, because the people who want to exploit it will not stop wanting to exploit it because they've been discouraged. It's that people have to be willing to push back with the same energy that is being used by the people who want to exploit. So that's you guys. Any other questions?
Sam, thank you very much for this fantastic presentation. Hello.
Hi.
Good afternoon. I'll get right to the point. It's wonderful what you're talking about on the global side of things, but most of the people in this room are thinking we're 100 miles from the ocean, as you said. We recycle, and we feel good about it when we go to the transfer station and we're separating our trash. And then we can sleep at night because we live in the northwest corner and it's wonderful. And I think what Sam wants us to do when we go home tonight and separate our trash is go to that website and click on the donate button.
Or pick a career in this.
Yeah.
Or
drop everything and go to the ocean. But I was reflecting that what you said about trash and recycling, these things are very cyclical. In the beginning, recycling didn't catch on. So they had to add and make incentives. And it didn't catch on. And then we had, my wife in the garage would have separate bins for glass and plastic and newspaper and printed, non-printed computer paper. I was very conscientious about separating it all. It took 2 years for me to convince her that at the transfer station it all goes into one hole in the ground. But it makes us feel good about saving the oceans by recycling and being good about plastic. But you're right, the plastic industry is in charge. So what I advocate is that, okay, it'll make you feel good to do those things, but go to the website and learn more about it.
Oh, thank you. You're making my point. Oh, good.
That was the idea.
Thank you.
Oh, 1 second.
I don't know what time of night it is. I think everybody should be allowed to go home. Thank you very much.